Good evening. I'm Amy Scott Cooper, Director of the National Ramah Commission. We are so glad to see everyone here tonight and to have a wonderful program with a dear friend of Ramah, Ted Deutch. Ted, thank you from all of us. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to spend some time learning from you and having a discussion with you. Before I hand the program over to Rabbi Mitch Cohn, who is the former director of the National Ramah Commission, just a quick plug for the Ramah Israel solidarity trips that we have been running since the middle of December and are running almost every week during the next 2 months. If you're available and can join us for any one of these programs, the link to register is in chat, and there you can find more information about all of our programs. And we hope to see so many of you in Israel during the next few months. And now I'm delighted to introduce Rabbi Mitch Cohn.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks again. We'll introduce Ted in a moment. Just before we get started, I wanted to ask Arnie Harris, the president of the National Ramah Commission, who wants to bring a word of greeting.
Thank you. Thanks, Mitch, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Ramah educational program. Many people say, is our Ramah just a group of summer camps? Well, here's the evidence that we are so much, in addition to being just summer camps, as powerful as they are, with another great program that we're bringing. So on behalf of the National Ramah Commission and all the lay leaders that I work with, welcome to the program. Back to you, Mitch.
Thanks so much, Arnie. Again, Ted, thank you. In previous, Ted's volunteered his time for Ramah in so many different ways over so many years. We've had the opportunity to work together. Sadly, we're together tonight during much more difficult times, and but before we get into all that, I just wanted to say that perhaps Ted is best known for being the only congressman to have sung Rad Hayom on the Senate floor with hundreds of Ramahniks standing arm in arm, and that's the way I've gotten to know you the best, Ted. And just one other quick anecdote: I'm walking around visiting Camp Ramah, Wisconsin, I think in the summer of 2016, and Camp Ramah, Wisconsin still has, or still had, back in 2016, the old telephone system, and somebody came running after me and said, "Rabbi Mitch Cohn, there's a call for you from Ted Deutch." And I went running back to the telephone, and there he was, said, "Mitch, Wolf Blitzer and Jake Tapper are both hosting the Democratic Convention tonight. They're both Ramahniks, and they're both hosting the convention." You were just brimming with enthusiasm. And I just, that Ramahnis just comes through in such a menschlich and beautiful way. So Ted, thank you again for being with us tonight. For those of you who don't know Ted, which is probably very few of you, Ted grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, went to Camp Ramah in the Poconos, started out as a real estate attorney. Congratulations on the University of Michigan's win last night, by the way. You're a grad of both Michigan and Michigan Law School, I believe. And after a few years as real estate attorney, you became the congressman from Broward and Palm Beach counties in Democratic Congress.
I don't know why it's so low.
In the state of California, in the state of Florida, sorry. Putting stuff there. Could everybody mute themselves now, other than those who are speaking? If you don't mind, there's some background noise coming in. After serving for 12 years in Congress, which included being the chairman of the House Ethics Committee, being a senior member of the House Judiciary Committee, being a senior member of being involved in so many incredibly groundbreaking ways to support Israel and Judaism, and of course along many other causes along the way. We're just so proud to have you represent us as a Ramahnik, in many ways, Republican, Democrat, or otherwise. And then you recently took over as the CEO of the American Jewish Committee. So tonight we're going to explore a little bit about current events, some of your ideas, recent article you wrote on the gaslighting of Jews in Israel. And it's my pleasure just to welcome you tonight and ask you to just say a word of greeting, and then we'll get into some of the questions, Ted.
Well, thanks, Mitch. I've
I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm sorry that it is the day after this happened, but I was in Houston last night and needing a moment of joy, as we all have to seek out and really work hard to find, given the challenges to our community and to Israel. I found that at the college football championship game, and I apologize that I'm a little hoarse. Fortunately, you're not going to ask me to sing Rod Hayom or anything else now. But I'm really, really grateful, Mitch, for the opportunity. I just had a really good time watching the names roll through, people who have joined, and you are right about Ramah and Ramahniks and the connection that we all have. And I am no longer in Congress. I think Congress would be a better place if there were if the Ramahnik party was stronger still. But it's great to be with everyone, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. And I'll turn it over to you. By the way, Mitch, I should also just ask if we're taking questions, because if we are in the chat, I'll send you a list of all the people I've seen who have come on that we should not allow to ask me questions. So, go ahead.
Yeah, so a little bit about the format tonight. I have several questions I'd like you to get started with, and then after a little while, we will we'll turn to the chat, and I'll try to do my as best as I can to watch for the chat and to ask you those questions, Ted, so you don't have to worry about looking at it.
Yeah.
And if there are some people you could privately chat me if there are people who you want me to censure. You know all about that, right? Why don't you just begin by telling us, not that we understand completely what it is to be a congressman, but what's it been like transitioning from Congress to the AJC? Before we even get into current events, what's like the role of AJC? What's your role, and why? Maybe just a reflection, a little bit about why you made this powerful career change.
Sure. Thanks. I was, excuse me, I was a member of Congress for 7 terms, and I loved it, and I was proud of the work that I did. And for those who I do know from camp, I grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I didn't really serving in Congress was not really something that I thought would be a career path that I could pursue, but I had this opportunity. I wound up in Congress for a long time. I worked on foreign policy issues. I chaired the Middle East subcommittee, so everything having to do with Israel came through our committee. I really enjoyed it, but along the way, I spent time traveling, and every time I traveled, I reached out to AJC, American Jewish Committee, to learn about the Jewish communities in the places I was going, whether it was Czech Republic or the UAE or all places in between. I worked on a number of efforts with AJC. We launched the Black Jewish Caucus, the Latino Jewish Caucus in Congress, the Hellenic Israel Alliance, bringing together Israel and the countries from the Eastern Mediterranean, Greece and Cyprus. So I knew AJC well. I loved what I was doing. There were lots of challenges. I represented Parkland. The shooting in Parkland was a really difficult moment. It was made easier, by the way, for me and for our community because of the Ramah connection that allowed me to reach out to Jake Tapper and urge him to get CNN to do a town hall in our community, which did wonders for our community and helped launch a whole generation of young leaders from coming out of that. Anyway, that was a really hard.
Ted, you know Jake. Yeah. You were his counselor at camp.
I was his counselor, correct?
Okay, just want to clarify.
Yeah. So between Parkland and January 6th and COVID, there was a lot that was really challenging. David Harris had been the CEO of AJC for over 30 years, and he announced he was retiring. And someone that I had worked with over the years at AJC called and asked if I would consider throwing my hat in to be considered for the position. And excuse me. And I decided it was worth thinking about leaving Congress to do. And AJC, I don't want to assume any level of knowledge on anyone's part. even this group of Ramah folks. AJC has been around for more than a century, 117 years. It exists to enhance the well-being of the Jewish community in Israel and advance democratic values. We have postings in 40 places around the world, 26 in the United States, 14 around the world. And we work quite simply with leaders in diplomacy and in politics, in government, in education, in the corporate world, in other communities, whether it's other religions, other ethnic communities. We work with them to help strengthen the place of Jews in the world. And for me to have the opportunity to spend 100% of my time working on the issues that I'm most passionate about, that I care most deeply about, I decided that it was worth leaving Congress to pursue. And I had no idea that in my first week in the new job, Kanye West would go on his anti-Semitic tirade online, which at the time we thought was results in a dramatic spike in anti-Semitism and a big national conversation, having no idea that that a year later 10/7 would happen and we would be put in this position where the Jewish community came to really understand the precarious position that Israel finds itself in, the threats to not just Israel, but to the Jewish community, the connection, really, I think in ways that most of us have not felt in our lifetime, between the Jewish community, between the diaspora and Israel, and how very much a part of one another and how much we rely upon one another, and how that's especially true when we both feel vulnerable. That's the moment that we find ourselves in now. So it's been a little more than a year since I left Congress, and while it's been really challenging, it's a privilege to be able now to spend all of my time, as I said, working on behalf of the Jewish community in Israel. And happy to talk much more about that, but that's what took me to this place, and that's why I think it's so important to be doing this work now. And Mitch, the last thing I'd say on this is, I know this is true in the Jewish community generally. It is absolutely true in Ramah and the Ramah community and among my Ramah friends, that the commitment that we all felt before 10/7 has been ratcheted up, often dramatically. And all of the things that we're now doing, whether it's advocacy or contributing money to help Israel, or wearing our Jewish stars, in mezuzot outside so everyone can see, making sure that we are not just supporting Israel and the Jewish community, but doing it proudly for everyone around us to see. That's been really inspiring to me, and it's a big part of what we're all trying to do now.
So that leads to the next question. Let's jump into a little bit of controversy here. Just because we represent so many young people, college kids and high school and young adults, so many of whom you speak to are just so conflicted and so torn, whether they're hesitant to wear their Jewish stars and be publicly proud Jews on campus these days, whether they're ethically conflicted about civilian deaths in Gaza, whether they're feeling just all these issues of conflict that our young people are feeling right now. What do you say to them? I'm not talking about people on the extremes. I'm talking about people within the 20-yard lines here who want to be supportive of Israel, right, left, and center, but are really struggling nowadays. I'd love to hear some support for that.
Yeah, look, first of all, I think most of us in the community operate somewhere, whether it's between the 20s, the 40s. We're not, the Jewish community doesn't spend most of its time on the extremes. We spend most of our time trying to find ways to engage together, especially after 10/7, after the anti-Semitism that we've seen rise so dramatically and so violently across the United States and around the world, and has made us realize that there is this greater connection that we feel now, that as I said before, that I think is greater than it's been for so many of us in our lifetimes. What I say to people, and I talk to a lot of young people, we do a lot on college campuses. We work with university presidents, university, deans of student life, administrators, to how this was before 10/7. It's especially true since we've seen the horrific protests, people marching in support of Hamas on college campuses. We push university presidents to actually implement plans to combat anti-Semitism and keep Jewish students safe. So even as we're doing that, we're also working to lift up the voices of students. We have a campus global board. Really, it's just a really impressive, inspiring group of young people on campuses, literally around the world. And I travel to a lot of campuses, and there are two sets of questions that we get most. The first is the question that you ask, which is, what do I do? Either I'm conflicted or I don't know how to respond when people talk about what they're seeing in Gaza and how painful it is. And I think we have to, and this again is a call full of Ramonics, so it should be, I think, the easiest for all of us. No one should do anything off the bat except acknowledge the horror of the loss of civilian life. Of course, we all mourn the loss of civilian life, and that's first what we saw, and especially in the most painful and horrific ways on 10/7, when Hamas terrorists came and slaughtered over 1,200 and took hundreds hostages and injured thousands, and have said that they want to do it over and over again. That the loss of life that day, and the stories that we've read since, and the film that the IDF put together, and the story that the really painful and graphic story that the New York Times ran about sexual violence that day. I mean, all of that we need to continue to refer to, because it leads into the next point. The loss of life in Gaza, the loss of life of civilians, is really hard to see. We need to remind people that the reason that there is a war is because Hamas launched a war against Israel, attempting to kill thousands, in the worst day for the Jewish community since the Holocaust. And if we listen simply to what Hamas leaders have said about the way that they do, not only do they not fail to value human life the way that Israel does, the way that we do, they intentionally put civilians in harm's way, because, as they've said out loud, the more civilians, the more Palestinian civilians who are killed, the more they think that will help them in world opinion. We can mourn the loss of civilians and also acknowledge that so many of these lives that we're now talking about are lives that Hamas has put at risk. They've put at risk by the attack on 10/7. They put them at risk because they don't allow them to flee to safe havens. They put them at risk most especially because they've taken all of the money that poured into Gaza, something that an issue that I spent enormous amounts of time on when I was in Congress. And they took that money that was meant to help the people of Gaza, and they invested in underground facilities to house terrorists, to be able to have command structures where they could launch attacks against Israel. They put their rockets inside of mosques and under hospitals and next to and inside of schools. We can point that out and ultimately say, Mitch, everyone in the world would expect their own country to take action to defend them if they face the kind of attack that Israel faced on 10/7. And Israel is no different, and they have that same right. So that's one question that I think we have to be honest about. Yes, we mourn the loss of civilians, but let's understand why these civilians, unfortunately, are dying. And the second question that the people always ask on campuses when I'm there is, they say, we've spent I got this question. I was at Harvard about 6 weeks ago, and one of the kids said, I spent all of my time in college working with all of my friends on issues that matter to them. Now the Jewish community is at risk. We face anti-Semitism. I care deeply about Israel. Israel is constantly under attack from October 7th and forward, and none of my friends are there for me. That's the other question that we also have to ask, that we have to be able to answer. And the way we answer that is to remind people that those relationships that we form are important, so that people will be there for us at moments like this. And if they're not, it also reminds us that we have a responsibility in our community to stand up for ourselves. And I hope we can talk more about the intergroup work and interreligious work that we do at AJC. I think it's important, but those two things we have to acknowledge what's happening on the ground, why it's happening, and then the challenge that we face in our own country, where people that we expected to and need there to be for us have not been.
Yes. Ted, you recently have published an article, I think in the Chicago Tribune, which we talked about in the publicity for this event, called I think the global gaslighting of Jews in Israel. Just comment a little bit about your key thesis there and why you decided to publish that.
Yeah, it actually gets, Mitch, this gets right back to the whole issue of what's happening on college campuses. Yeah. We've had now for years, we saw the rise of the BDS movement. We saw those on college campuses try to intimidate Jewish students. People marched and chanted from the river to the sea, and they talked about Israel as a settler colonial state. And frankly, in our own community, in a lot of ways, we tried to find nuance. We tried to, as most of us are fierce defenders of the First Amendment, people have the right to speak out. We try to I think too often look for ways to not justify what was said, but to point out how unacceptable it is, and then what the right responses are. What we've seen since 10/7, starting immediately after 10/7, before Israel even began to defend itself against Hamas in Gaza, was a series of protests that have continued on college campuses, at the Holland Tunnel in New York, trying to prevent LaGuardia from operating. We've seen interruptions of the Thanksgiving Day parade and the lighting of the tree at Rockefeller Center and American flags being torn down. We've seen all of this, and it's accompanied by this series of lies that we have to now be clear. When you march in support of Hamas, there is no way but to judge what you're saying, what's being said, as anything other than the defense of the terror attack, the horrific terror attack against civilians in Israel. And I thought it was important, and I've been trying to do this in the talks I give around the country, to point out that this whole effort to describe what's happening in terms that are lies, that need to be confronted, so that we're in a position to push back, to be aggressive, to tell the truth. I thought it was important. So there are several lies that continue to be thrown about. The first is again, from the river to the sea, and the idea that means anything other than the elimination of Israel, the one Jewish state in the world. That's what from the river to the sea means. And we've got to be clear about it. We've got to make sure people understand that. When there's conversation about, when the accusations that Israel is a white settler colonialist state, every part of that is wrong. I mean, Israel today is, if we're using those terms, Israel is a minority country. It's the place where Jews have lived in one way or another for 3,000 years. This is not, these aren't political arguments. These are factual arguments. It completely discounts Zionism as the modern Zionism, as the liberation movement of the Jewish people. It's not that Israel is a colonial state that colonizers came into. It's in fact the redemption of Israel from the British, from the colonial power that was there. After the UN, all of us know this, but after the UN voted to create Israel, and these are just really important lies that we have to push back again. And then the last one, talking about globalizing the Intifada. Well, for those of us, and I know there are people on here who know people lost friends and relatives during the Second Intifada, when over 1,000 civilians were killed in a whole series of bombings, suicide bombings, on buses, in cafes, at a Passover Seder, in restaurants. that's what they mean when they talk about globalizing the Intifada. And then finally, when they talk about Gaza genocide, that's perhaps the most nefarious of all. That's what's happening this week when South Africa brought a case to the International Court of Justice accusing Israel of genocide when it takes the whole term of genocide created after the Holocaust and turns it on its head when it is Hamas that meets the very different definition of genocide when it launched this attack attempting to massacre Jews on 10/7. I just think it's important to continue to push back against these lies, and we have to do it boldly and forcefully and not be defensive. What we've seen on the other side now for a long time is this concerted, well-funded effort to, especially on college campuses, to keep asserting a whole series of lies until they're believed. And there are multiple ways to fight back against them, but first and foremost is the truth, and that's why we're trying to do that.
Thanks. Just to change the subject briefly, just from a Ramah perspective, you know, we host hundreds of mishlachat every summer. We've been so many of us have been reaching out to them, and so many of them are, you know, reservists, or they're fighting now, or, you know, we've certainly, there've been losses in the Ramah community. There's still Ramah hostages among all the other horrible situations of captivity. What, in your view, is the best way for us to be supporting Israel and Israelis right now?
Well, I appreciate your asking the question. I will tell you one thing that everybody here should do, and you should take it to your communities and organize around this as quickly and as boldly as you possibly can. We had a call today, a Zoom with John Poland and Rachel Goldberg Poland, Hirsch's parents, and so many of the people on this call know them, know Hirsch. Hirsch is an American citizen and an Israeli citizen, and he and over 130 others are now closing in on 100 days in captivity. Rachel, who has gone everywhere to tell her story and the story of Hirsch and what happened to him and what they're doing to try to elevate the issue of the hostages, which AJC has been working hard to do as well. People know her because, one, she's so powerful, and she has a piece of masking tape that every day she writes the number of days that Hirsch has been held hostage. And this was her thing. She now wants it to be our thing. So this Sunday marks 100 days. And I would encourage everyone here to start on that day. But going forward, and we're trying to get elected officials to do this. We're trying to get celebrities to do this. This is the easiest way to show your support. Take that piece of masking tape, put the number 100 on it, change it every day thereafter, and wear it on your chest. And or on your lapel. And when you go places, people will ask what it is and will give you the opportunity to talk about what Hamas did in taking all of those hostages and the fact that there are 130 who are still in captivity. And that includes men and women and children with an age range of 85 years. That's a really important thing that people can do. It is simple, and I would encourage everyone to start doing that. And again, the 100th day is coming up, and it's the perfect time to start that. So that's one very specific idea. Beyond that, there are a lot. There's so many different ways to be involved. There are those in the community who are raising money to help on the ground in Israel. That's really important. In our case, AJC has been engaged again in our advocacy work, in meetings in everyone from the foreign minister of Chile and the Jewish communities of 14 communities across Latin America that I met with last month, to meeting with the Chancellor of Germany and the German Jewish community to make sure that they're protected and that the Germans continue to stand with Israel as they have thus far, to the ongoing work that we do with members of Congress and the administration that's a really important, that's that advocacy is really important. And I encourage people to reach out to our AJC offices or others in the community, whether it's the CRCs or federations, other groups in your communities who are engaged in that process of advocacy to make sure that everyone continues to remember what happened on 10/7, why Israel has that right to defend itself as everyone else does, and to make sure that that our friends and neighbors understand the threats that our community feels right now, so that they can continue to stand there with us. I'm going back to Israel next week. I know there are regular trips that that synagogues and federations and our organization and other organizations have been running short trips. There is, for those of you who have gone, you know this. There is, you can't overstate the importance of these visits and what it means to our brothers and sisters in Israel to feel that support. That's a really powerful thing that people can do as well. There are a million ways to be involved, and what's most important is just to make sure that this is a priority every day, that in some way we're trying to find some way to do this, whether it's through a Facebook group, a WhatsApp group, whether it's through things that you post on Instagram or share on Instagram. I'd encourage people. I'm proud of the communications work that AJC has done. Our Instagram posts a lot of things that others feel good about sharing. Just making sure that we continue to keep hammering home Israel's right to defend itself after this horrific attack, and to bring home the hostages now. That's what ties the humanity of the world to this. They may be confused about Israel and the Palestinians. They may not understand the history. They may have been confused by some of those lies that I talked about. But everyone understands that if there are Americans being held hostage anywhere in the world, we have a responsibility to demand that they be released, and that's what this moment requires.
Ted, on behalf of the Ramah directors, and someone who served as director for 11 years and national director, I mean, it's very, very frustrating. We build these incredible Zionist incubators, which cause people to make aliyah and become pro-Israel, to learn about Israel. And a small segment, a very, very small segment of our alumni come out with some more extreme positions, so there's a lot of press given to If Not Now, and how some of them had gone to Ramah camps, and then Ramah and If Not Now gets associated together. What would you suggest we do, internal conversation as Ramahniks, to counter that and to make it clear to everyone that Ramah, and we're not the only one, but there are other wonderful Jewish summer camps and education institutions, are the best thing going now for creating strong support for Israel among the future?
Yeah, Mitch, I tell you the same thing that I tell my former colleagues in Congress, that I tell people who ever are on the receiving end of criticism about their institution not doing enough. But with Ramah, it's easy. The answer is not to spend a whole lot of time trying to explain what you're not. The answer is to point to what Ramah is, and what Ramahniks do and have done, and for whatever amount of attention some pay to the far left, the anti-Israel left, the real story is in the Ramah alumni in communities across the country and across the world, and on college campuses across the United States, who are actively involved in leadership positions on behalf of the Israel advocacy movement. That's what Ramah is. It just, in terms of sheer numbers, whether it's what I know from the people I went to camp with, the people that I've met, the Ramahniks that I used to take on the House floor to sing Rad Hayom, among other things, to my kids and their friends who went to Ramah.
Ramah Darom.
to Ramah Durham. There's this remarkable community, and kudos, by the way, Mitch, to everyone, Arnie, and to everyone at Ramah who have taken these enormous strides at recognizing the power of the Ramah community and finding more ways for people to engage. That's the best response to those kinds of articles. We shouldn't throw our hands up and say, wait, that's not us. We should proudly stand up and tell people who we are and point out that everywhere you go in the world where you're looking for Jewish leadership, more likely than not, you're going to find Ramonics. That's the positive story that we should be telling.
Great point. You know, Amy and I were together in Israel just a few weeks ago. We sat with Rachel and John, and heard about Hirsch and their direct experiences. We went, we were at army bases. We were in Bedouin communities down near Gaza. I really do encourage, as Amy said at the beginning of this meeting, I do encourage everybody to come. I was a little skeptical of what it would have meant to be like on a 3-day trip. But from all of our Israeli friends, just to be able to tell their story. I was the director of Camp Run Canada years ago, and one of our alumni, tragic story. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard this, and from Jackie Rivers Vital, whose daughter Adi was murdered on October 7th, whose 2 little boys, 4 and maybe 6 months old, were taken to captivity and then released on that same day, and miraculously survived. I mean, she and her husband, who was there on October 7th and survived, told their story. Just to be in the same room with these people, even though I had read everything and heard everything, it meant so much to me, to all of our group. Amy could tell you about all of her experiences as well. And then we announced that we're doing a number of these trips. And if you look at the top of our chat, or you go to our website, you'll see the possibility of coming on a Ramah Solidarity mission. We have many coming up over the next several weeks and months. I'll be doing one on March 26th. It meant so much to the people we were in the room with. And like you said, that's really one of the most powerful things that can be happening now. People ask, I would ask you this question, Ted, but people ask how safe it is for American Jews to travel to Israel now, where the State Department is coming from in terms of that kind of travel. Is there something you could tell us to, either calm us down or let us know what the reality is about travel to Israel at this time?
Yeah, I think everyone, every group that plans a trip to Israel is in contact with Israeli officials. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel is, first and foremost, they're committed to making sure that as they strengthen relations between Israel and the world, they know that when anyone comes to visit, that safety is of paramount importance. AJC's taken now 7 trips of members of parliament from around the world to Israel since 10/7, and we work closely with the government to gauge if there are security risks or not, just as Ramah Seminar does in a good year, always paying attention to what's happening and adjusting schedules as need be.
And we have over 200 signed up for this summer right now.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Turning back to politics, Ted, not to let you off the hook too easily. What's your view of what's going on in the Democratic Party right now? And what does the future look like 10, 20 years from now with regard to support for Israel?
Well, first, I don't know if I told you, Mitch, but I'm really, really thrilled to be running a fiercely nonpartisan organization now. And look, I'm concerned about anti-Semitism on the far left and on the far right. For a long time, the attention was focused on anti-Semitism on the far right, on classic conspiracy theories that continue to be problematic and that always wind up coming back to the Jews. But since 10/7, it's the anti-Semitism from the far left, from those for whom their not just criticism of, but frankly their hatred of Israel is now a fundamental part of their political worldview. and the need for us to continue to push to make sure that that doesn't become normalized. I mean, how concerned am I? Well, I think we should all be focused on making sure that the elected officials that we know and that we work with understand the importance of Israel to the United States, understand the place of the Jewish community in the United States, and how at risk we feel when anti-Israel elements in politics, on college campuses, and in the community say the kinds of things that are intended to shut down debate and ultimately call for violence. We've got to speak out about that. That's how we determine. That's the role that we play in determining what happens over the next 10 and 20 years in politics. And we can't back down from that. It is there are absolutely challenges that we face. The fact is, the vast majority of there's still broad support for Israel in the Democratic Party and Republican Party. But as we look ahead to the summer and the conventions in the Democratic convention in Chicago, the Republican convention in Milwaukee, I think that's going to be a place, certainly at AJC, as we think about it, that's going to be a place where we are going to have a really important moment to make sure that the policies, that the platforms of both parties in the United States continue to reflect that strong support for Israel. And while there will likely be those who fight hard against that, now is the time for us to really assert ourselves, to make sure that we're continuing to stand strong in the face of some of this anti-Israel far left propaganda that comes from, unfortunately, some in elected office.
Ted, I assume AJC doesn't take any political stands with regard to Israeli politics. Has it been difficult? Have you taking some of the farther right parties, Ben Gvir as a minister, Smotrich as a minister? Have you worked with them? Have you been meeting with them? Are there difficulties there?
Look, one of the things that we saw post 10/7 is this incredible coming together in Israel and in the Jewish community and in Israel diaspora relations, but especially in Israel. Remember, the conversation just ahead of 10/7 was almost entirely about judicial reform, and it was about divisions in Israel and people who said that they wouldn't show up if reservists who wouldn't show up if called, and the fracturing of Israeli society, and since 10/7, and Mitch, you know this, for people who have been to Israel, you've seen this, the unity, the way the country is standing together, the fact that the protest movement morphed literally overnight into a movement to provide assistance for Israelis who were displaced and to make sure that the needs of the country were being met. It's astonishing. And so we're working hard to make sure that unity continues. And so we've worked with our global forum. Our big annual meeting was in Tel Aviv last June, and we had leaders from the Israeli government and from the opposition participate. We continue to engage with the Prime Minister's office, members of the government, as well as those on the outside. AJC views our roles to advocate for the entirety of the Jewish community, 16 million of us out of a global population of 8 billion. So we in Israel, we don't get involved in Israeli politics, but we do speak out about the importance of Israel diaspora relations and making sure that the words that come out of Israeli leaders, we want them to understand how those words are often heard in the diaspora. And again, since 10/7, we want to make sure that just as Israel continues to stand united, that diaspora Jewry works together in support of Israel.
And I'm hearing the strain in your voice, so we'll have just the last few questions.
Sure.
I really appreciate you staying up for us tonight. It's a stormy evening, in most of the United States at least. Can you share with us some conversations you've had with community leaders that can be encouraging about either support for Israel or anti-Semitism in the United States, or the two different issues. Let's start with support for Israel. Then we'll talk about encouraging news about anti-Semitism, if that's not an oxymoron in a moment. But can you share with us any off-the-record conversations even that you've been having with people that would lead us to believe that there is some reason for optimism?
Look, if you look at, I mean, I have conversations with my former colleagues, excuse me, quietly. But if you, there was just a trip in Israel that went on to Doha, to Qatar, Senator Ernst, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and others. And if it's encouraging it just in the conversations I've had and in the public statements that we've seen, that there is this fierce commitment to standing with Israel, and we, just as I don't want to give too much attention to those in elected office who are on the far left, whose positions are anathema to our own. At the same time, the same thing is true here. We have to look at the positive statements that have come from our electeds and from the administration. We have, and here I'll tell you, we've had conversations. I've had conversations with the Secretary of State and the White House Middle East team about what's happening now. And if you look at the president's statement immediately after the speech the president gave immediately after 10/7, which I think most of us would agree is the most powerful pro-Israel speech that we've ever heard from a U.S. president, that even as the language may have changed somewhat from the administration since, as we approach day 100, the fact is that the U.S. continues to stand firmly with Israel as Israel defends itself. That's really encouraging. And I think, I think it's important to know. I mentioned the conversations that I've had. I'll just give you one example globally. When we met with the Chancellor of Germany, at a moment when the Jewish community was facing a synagogue that was firebombed, Jewish stars being spray painted onto the homes of Jews, a really fraught moment for the Jewish community. The Chancellor Schultz spoke very powerfully about the need to continue to stand with Israel and the need to stand in defense of the Jewish community of Germany. That kind of statement really matters, and it's what we spend so much of our time doing. And in terms of anti-Semitism, there's a lot of attention. We don't have time to really go in depth into what's happening on college campuses. Obviously, we all watched that hearing in Washington and the abysmal performance of the university presidents. Well, I can tell you the number of calls that we've received, the number of conversations I've had with university presidents since, who don't ever want to be in that position, who want to be able to get it right, who want to make sure that they're working to strengthen the ability for their Jewish students to feel secure and to push back against the anti-Semitic, anti-Israel crowd that continues to persist on too many college campuses. Those conversations have been very encouraging. And the biggest point to make there is, it's not, this isn't a situation where we go back to things the way they were before. Even after Israel wins this war, even when things die down on college campuses, the battle to make sure that we're pushing back against the anti-Semites on campus, whether it's efforts to silence Jews who support Israel or to exclude Jews from organizations because they support Israel, or the ongoing efforts on some in the faculty to celebrate what happened on 10/7, that's going to continue long after, and that's going to require all of us to be involved, just as we're going to continue to be involved at the K-12 level, where more and more we're seeing this play out across the country in schools where heads of school and private schools don't know how to react. So we've been doing a lot of trainings for independent schools. We've been fighting school boards as they try to institute curricula which marginalize Jewish communities, ignore Jewish communities, and anti-Semitism. It requires ongoing vigilance, but I think there's reason to be hopeful, because there is such a concerted effort on not just on our part, but on so many who do this work with us and in the broader community, to make sure that we're continuing this battle on into the future. It requires constant vigilance with elected officials, with education officials. We could speak for hours about the work that we're doing to push back against the lies on TikTok, and which has become a cesspool of anti-Israel vitriol. The same thing with X and on Instagram. The number of people who have got, I'll end with this, Mitch. Here's the most encouraging number of people who have reached out to me, to AJC, to other organizations, who have said, I've been involved in philanthropy. I've supported my university. I've supported the hospital. I've supported the museum. I never thought it was necessary to worry about the Jewish community. I was wrong. The number of people who are now firmly a part of this battle with all of us on behalf of a strong and secure Jewish community and state of Israel grows every single day. And we're working to make sure that continues to happen, and that we provide meaningful opportunities for people to get out there and advocate proudly as Jews for the Jewish community and for Israel.
That is encouraging, Ted. Thank you so much. I think on behalf of all of us from Camp Ramah, all of us tonight, we're proud of you and all the work you do. To say it doesn't sound trite. We're glad that a Ramonic is representing us in so many different ways, and we continue to follow you and the work you're doing in AJC. I know that everybody here is proud of their camps, their home camps, their sister camps, all the network that we have. Being together in community is so important. Even on something like tonight, I'm already feeling, I'm seeing the texts and it's just thank you so much for giving us a great excuse and some really, really interesting and in sobering times, some really great encouraging information. We look forward. We hope we'll have you back in not too distant future, when hostages, please God, hostages are freed and Israel is safer and more secure, and anti-Semitism in the U.S. is not something that we're all talking about every 2 minutes. And we just send you the best to you and Jill and your kids and your whole mishpacha, and toda rabah and Erev Tov to everybody.
Mitch, thanks everyone. It's really great to see everybody, and I would encourage you come to ajc.org. I'm really proud of the content that we put out there to help the communities and help all of us figure out how to navigate our way through this. I'm especially proud to do it as a Ramah alum and a Ramah parent, and I really enjoyed this. Mitch, thanks. I hope you do it again soon.
Thank you. Toda rabah. Erev Tov l'kulam.
Thanks.